I'm delighted to have Dr. Paul Brown, Professor of Organizational Neuroscience, a clinical and organizational psychologist, and an executive coach and supervisor with us. Paul has the most wonderful way to explain very complex things in a very simple way, which is why I'm so excited he's joining us today. So, Paul, as you know, I worked in the corporate environment for many years, and I think it's pretty safe to say that being emotional in that kind of environment definitely has kind of negative connotations associated with it. And so I would often feel like I had to actively manage my emotions. And this would be both in terms of my reactions and in terms of my responses to things, which both took a lot of energy and also felt like I wasn't really being real. So if I felt like I did need to be emotional, then which would totally happen because there would be high stress situations which I would be needing to manage. It felt like I would really be having to squash myself, and it would help me. It would mean that I lost my confidence. So what I wanted to do with you today was talk through around what actually are emotions. Why do we have them? Is it a weakness? And how can we have a healthy relationship with emotions that really helps us build our confidence?
Wow. Okay. um, what absolutely fascinating questions. I think the question of healthy relationship with emotions, just to tackle the last one first, actually needs focusing on men, not on women.
Mm.
How is it that men could have a much healthier relationship with their emotions, particularly in the Western world, and particularly perhaps Englishmen? So let's come back to that in due course. Um, what the 21st century brain sciences have shown us is that everything that we are understanding in the world is capable of being understood because of our emotional system. Now, that's a radical shift. For 300 years or so, the Western world has progressed on the idea that we think our way through the world. What the 21st century has told us is that actually our thinking system is an extraordinary way of our brain telling us a story about what our brain already knows. Because if you think about it, we couldn't think about something that didn't already exist. Well, what does already exist? What already exists is that our brain is picking up data nanosecond by nanosecond and interpreting it for us in terms of our experience. So that there is a mechanism inside the brain. There are two, if you can think of a line coming in here and here, where they meet, there are two areas of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is called the amygdala because the Greek word for almond is amygdalon. And the amygdala are two areas of the brain like intensely sensitive radar system. And everything that's happening is filtered through the amygdala to find out its emotional significance. Because the first task of the amygdala is to look for danger. That's how we got here. And so the emotional system is organized in the first place around the capacity to respond to anything that has got danger attached to it. Though danger may be interpreted entirely in terms of your actual experience.
Mm.
So the kind of man who you think is real trouble for another person is really interesting. For instance, it's in
Yep.
terms so our brain is constructed from day one of infancy onwards, actually in the last 3 months of pregnancy, but let's just take it from day one. Our brain is constructed in terms of the way the amygdala assign emotion to experience. A baby, 6 months old, gurgling, opening its arms, smiling at its mother, mother smiling back. The amygdala knows that that face is about love and has assigned love one of the basic emotions to that particular experience. But think of a mother who is depressed, miserable, angry, actually furious that she got pregnant, is coping with a baby she really fundamentally doesn't want, and actually is creating a relationship with that baby which is, from the baby's point of view, very uncertain. That amygdala in that baby is actually creating anxiety, distress in relation to that particular phase. So there are this set of 8 basic emotions that are the way we create meaning in the world. Now, other animals simply create reaction. So a favorite horse, a favorite dog will startle. Or it sees you coming with an apple in your hand to a horse. It canters across the field in no time at all. It's created a relationship with you, but it's only reacting to event. We have this extraordinary capacity to actually put words with an adaptive language to event. And so we not only have a world we are reacting to, we have an internal world which we're also reacting to based on words. So the development of a child is from this first 2 to 3 years of living entirely in an emotional world, creating the substrate of the emotions that will do for the rest of life. Okay.
And so if we were to look at those 8 basic emotions, could you just talk through briefly in terms of why we have them? So, you know, the different ones, why would they come up from an evolutionary perspective?
Let's start out with the first, which is surprise and startle.
Mm.
So surprise and startle sets us up to find out what's going to happen next. And the question in the brain is this something that I'm going to be interested in or that I've got to escape from? Okay. But you don't know until whatever happens next what the answer to that is. And then we'll show these in a fan. Coming down this fan, on the left-hand side, we've got the escape avoidance emotions, the survival emotions, the ones that got us here. Fear, anger, disgust, shame, and sadness. And all the higher animals show those: favorite dog, favorite horse, elephants, chimpanzees, probably whales, probably porpoises. But animals simply use them to react. Okay, if I walk into my garden, my dog will come to a whistle because it expects food in relation to the whistle. It only gets food about every 20th time, but it keeps coming to the whistle. It reacts. If we go to the right-hand side of the fan, we've got the great emotions of human experience: excitement, joy, trust, and love. But they can be squashed by the escape avoidance emotions. They're not primary survival emotions in the way that the escape avoidance emotions are. And so the great emotions of human experience are difficult to maintain. But we come into the world with 8 basic emotions ready to be triggered. Now, to go back to your very first question, which is about being emotional in organizations, what men at the moment do not really understand is that every decision they make is based on emotion. But it seems to be the case that men's brains and women's brains function somewhat differently. They actually are slightly different inside. The man's brain is slightly larger. And in the Victorian period, when that was discovered, it was generally thought, that shows the superiority of men. Okay, the brain. Actually, we now know that the woman's brain packs more brain cells in than the man's brain. It may be a bit smaller physically, but it's actually more powerful. There are 2 halves to the brain, and the left side of the brain tends to deal with what is known, and it focuses, and it narrows, and it wants answers, and it likes to particularize things. The right side of the brain opens things up. It explores. It's looking for what is new. It's excited by discovery. Now, the male brain, this is quite a generalization, but there's a lot of evidence in support of it. The male brain tends to focus in one half or the other. So I have said that men are either or systems. Men like answers. Tell me the answer. And most women have had the
Or solution. Mm.
yeah, most women have had the experience that they want to talk about something with a man, and the man tells them the answer.
Mm.
Wants to get on with whatever he's getting on with. Okay. Now, women's brains seem to operate in both halves at the same time. So women are in a continuous state of looking around the corner for things, exploring. Women are solution seekers. Men are problem solvers. Men want the answer. Women want to know what's next, what's next, what's next. And women do that through conversation. Men think, why are they talking so much? Actually, it's because they are exploring possibilities,
Mm.
whereas men just want answers. Okay?
And if that goes to the next step, does that is that where women may ruminate more than men?
Yes, yes. Women go on thinking about the the whole context of what's been going on.
Yep.
Whereas men, we got an answer, let's do it. Let's do it. Because
Yep.
one of the extraordinary things for men is that men only know themselves, their identity. They only know themselves by what they do. You will have had lots of experience in organization. Men have achieved something, they want to celebrate. They want to tell their friends, they want to go out for a drink, they want to have a brief period of relaxation but be recognized for what they have done. By and large, women don't want to do that. They'll do it because they've learned to be good corporate citizens in a male world. But by and large, women don't want to be, going out for drinks to celebrate what they've done. They want to go out for drinks because they want to be in a relationship with the people they're going out for drinks with. Quite different places. So
Yeah.
I think what the 21st century is showing us is that male and female energy is quite different, and organizations haven't understood that at all. So if we look at the history of feminism, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, an amazing social shift in your generation of women can be absolutely confident you are free to be in the world in your own right. But actually, the price of that organizationally has been then to adapt to the way men do things. So the argument for equality, unfortunately, carries with it the definition that we as women, wanting to be equal with men, are defining ourselves in relation to men, not in saying, but who are we as women?
Mm.
And when we ask the question, who am I as a woman? The answer fundamentally is, I'm not a man. And I don't want to be one of those, thank you very much. But how can I be me inside an organization? Now, this takes us into the whole question of being emotional. The task with our emotions is to regulate them, not to control them. I think that's the wrong word, but to be able to have them in a way that they are appropriate. There are many organizations, and I expect you will have experienced something like this, that in a department, the department all the time, when the boss walks in, is checking what's his or her mood today, because that will define the whole of their working experience for the rest of the day. And a boss who comes in who is angry about something and spills it out, you can feel it seeping out from his door, as it were. People approaching him with a bit of caution, not wanting to interrupt him, not wanting to. Poorly regulated emotional system, because he's bringing into the situation something about anger or frustration that is not appropriate to the context of the office that he's walking into. Okay, so that's poorly regulated. It's a bit like We need lots of rain, we need good weather, but in Australia you've been having these awful storms, floods, and the system has not coped with the amount of water. So
Yeah.
sewage backs up, it gets disgusting. The drains aren't coping, it's not being regulated properly. Well, anger, rage, fear, sadness are of exactly the same kind, that in context they are absolutely crucial.
Mm.
But when they are present inappropriately and being poorly regulated, they then badly affect everybody else in the system.
Mm.
And so being emotional is a great skill. But men, particularly in the Western world, have generally been taught, don't do it. Men aren't emotional. Boys don't cry.
Yeah.
Actually, Winston Churchill was well known for crying. And one of his
Mm.
great strengths was that he could respond to things emotionally in a way that most of the men around him couldn't. He could be visionary in the way that he was. So how do we teach men the value of emotions? And if we hyphenate the word, E hyphen motion, we can see that embedded in that word forever has been energy produces action. Oh, our brain is in fact energized by, organized by, put into action by the way emotion flows.
And so when you're if you are in that situation, I think what comes up a lot from people who I work with, and how do you regulate them? How do you regulate them in a situation where you're under lots of pressure? You've dropped the kids off in the morning. You're trying to, whether it's homeschooling or just school holidays, or just having a lot of things going on. How do you regulate your emotions in a way that therefore gives you that confidence in that
First of all,
environment?
you've got to be able to agree with yourself that you're going to recognize them and name them. Because if you can't recognize them and name them, you don't have a starting point. And one of the problems for men is mostly they don't have a language for the emotions.
Mm, mm.
Again, as women, you will often have had you say to the man, "What are you feeling?" And he says, "Oh, I'm okay, thanks, don't worry." And the woman presses the point, and if you can see that the man can't find a way of expressing himself, and he gets cross. Leave me alone.
Right.
I'm all right. Okay? Because he doesn't actually have a language. So the first thing is one has to be able to agree with oneself that one is going to name one's emotions. And
Okay.
in terms of our 8 basic emotions, those are the good names. And the second thing then is to know that in context, that the skill of regulating them is itself part of an aesthetic. How do I respond? How do I teach myself to manage? And if I'm actually very stressed, I don't have much energy or capacity to manage my emotions. So they do get
Mm.
control. So stress, which is, um, do you know the Yerkes-Dodson curve? There is a very
Yes.
interesting
Yeah.
description of the way drive, when it gets too much, becomes stress. And for any particular given
Mm.
task, the amount of drive that needs to be generated will produce the best quality of performance. But if we're stressed, we're producing too much drive and performance deteriorates. Okay?
Mm.
So very often if we are
Mm.
stressed, we're in a hurry, there's too much to be done, we've got too much on our plate, we know we're running out of time, and I haven't had time to think about the presentation that I'm supposed to be making in 2 hours' time. Actually, our system doesn't have capacity to
Mm.
regulate ourselves properly. So what can we do? There are some very simple exercises connected with breathing, which actually allow us to get back in control of our system.
Mm.
Um, in a more extensive way, it's mindfulness. In a very much more extensive way, it's transcendental meditation. But there are some very simple exercises And the best one that I know is take a breath in for a count of 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold it for the same period of time, and then let that breath out for double the count, for a count of 8. And you will feel your diaphragm being engaged. And do that no more than 10 times. It will take 2 minutes. And you will actually have got your whole system back in balance, because in a very extraordinary way you've reoxygenated it. And that's the quickest and best way of getting back in control of one's emotional system that I know.
Wonderful. So then, from a clarification perspective around that the fan that you've been going through, is it right, therefore, to say the reason that we have more of those escape avoidance emotions is because that's been protective from an evolutionary perspective? That protects us from danger. And hence where you talk about that kind of primary, right? Okay, and so is that why we end up with that negativity bias as well when we're looking around? Yeah. Okay.
And also many organizations run off a background of fear and a bit of anxiety. Will I get it wrong? Will I be pulled up for something? Will I get it right? Those kinds of questions all the time, and that takes a lot of energy to manage. And so the organization gets stuck in doing what it knows, not actually growing beyond what it knows.
So if there was going to be, I guess, a summary that you would say around confidence, that what is confidence, and what would you say to people that is the important thing to know about confidence in the brain? What would that message be?
That in whatever context I find myself, I experience myself as coping well from within myself. And even if the environment I'm in is extremely unfamiliar, and I find myself in a situation that I've never been in before, a boss raging at me in a way that nobody has ever raged at me before, I actually can grab hold of my own emotions, name them, deal with them, and respond in the way that I come out of it feeling, oh, I did it. Okay. That's confidence.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been a fascinating conversation as always, and I'll very much look forward to seeing you soon.
Great pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.